My good friends, peace be with us. This particular charming lady held dearly her baby into her arms, the love of her life. It seemed that nothing else in this planet was more important than her little boy. And one day she was wandering around the outskirts of the city, going from valleys to mountains, and it seemed that at this particular mountain, she heard a voice coming from the inside of a cave. And this voice said, "Come in, walk in. In here, you will find all the treasures that someone can wish for. You will find of the splendors and all the glories that we all crave for. These will be riches that are insatiable to you." And of course, she doubted this voice because it didn't make any sense. Walk inside a cave and you get everything that you want. But because she's a woman, and women are very curious by nature, she walks inside this cave, and truly she sees golds, diamonds, rubies, pearls, and she's astonished by it. And the voice says, "You have 3 minutes to rid yourself with all these precious gems. After 3 minutes, a door will slam shut this cave and you can never enter it anymore." So she started collecting everything that she could. And it got into a point that the baby actually became a blockage. She puts her baby down, her little boy, gives him a quick quiz, and she turns her dress over to create a natural bag. And she stuffs everything that she can't. She doesn't know if she goes for the diamonds, or for the rubies, or for the pearls. They all look so precious. As she kept piling up, she hears the roar of the door coming down. And she couldn't hold on to this stuff anymore, so she grabbed even more with her mouth and she walked away, and the door slammed shut. She saw the sunshine and said, "I am as rich as a person can be." And while she was glorifying all this money, immediately she realizes she left her son inside the cave. She drops all the stones on the floor and she tries to open the heavy door. But of course, she couldn't. And she realizes that all this riches are not worth of anything if she doesn't have the most precious thing, which is her son. In life, we actually do the same thing. We go for temporary riches that doesn't fulfill us as individuals, and we left with empty hand when we think we have so much. And as a result, we create all these inner disturbances that psychiatry have created many labels for it. And the most recognizable one, depression. Statistics points out that if we put all depressed people in our hospitals, all the hospitals from the world, if they had only beds for depressed people, we couldn't keep up with it because of the quantity of people who are under depression. And the epitome of being depressed, it's suicide. Someone commits suicide is because the pain is so unbearable. The burden is so heavy that they want to take the pain away. And someone who is happy wouldn't commit suicide. So the epitome of having depression is to take our own lives. And when we study statistics, the numbers are horrific. Around the world in 1 year, approximately 1 million people kill themselves. In other words, every 42nd, someone is taking their own lives. Can you imagine the amount of people that would have died by the end of this lecture? And it seems that the idea of heaven is so prevalent in our age that we immediately assume that if we are rich, it means we're happy, therefore life is perfect. But that's not what the data shows. If that assumption was correct, we'll see these suicide rates going really up high in Africa, South America, some parts of Asia, where people still nowadays are living in refugee camps. But the numbers shows that these people who are killing themselves are actually those who live in very rich countries. Those countries, they are bathed by the Baltic Sea. Unfortunately, in the US alone, last year, around 650,000 people attempted to kill themselves. Out of those 650,000, unfortunately, 37,000 succeeded. 37,000 people actually killed themselves in this country alone last year. This number, it's so big that we can't picture it. If you have been to the Baltimore Stadium, try to picture that stadium filled to its full capacity twice, and that might give you some idea of how many people took their own lives. Now, why is it? What are the data showing? Are these poor people who are starving? Or do they have all the things that we consider happiness, and yet they're taking their own lives? Now, depression is nothing new. Historically speaking, back 400 years ago before Christ, the father of old medicine, Hippocrates, he studied depression. Not with this name, of course. There was a different name back then, melancholy. Then after him, Galeno, another Greek doctor, studied melancholy, and he thought that the reason people were depressed, it's because the 4 bodily fluids that controls all of our behavior and all of our physical ailments were unbalanced. The phlegm, the blood, the white bile, the red bile, the black bile, the yellow bile, they were out of balance. So the treatment back then for someone who had depression, they thought that if you had depression, your black bile was in excess in your body. As a result, they reinforced this technique in which will make people vomit until they cry, because the black bile was in excess within their body. And all the way up to the 1800s, this was the mentality. You had excess fluids in your body. We need to drain this fluid from you. So let's make you vomit until you can't anymore. And this will reduce the amount of fluid inside of your body. And that might restore you to health. Thank God, Emil Kraepelin, the great German psychiatrist, he's the one who actually noticed that this had nothing to do with levels of fluids in your body. It was actually something going on with your brain. But back then, the brain was not even looked at by the medical field. Now, people thought, even in medicine, that all of our behavior stemmed from our heart. This is why, even nowadays, when you remember a particular information, you say to yourself, yes, I know that by heart. I mean, your heart has nothing to do with your memory, but yet this is what we say to ourselves. Why? Because back then, the heart was the center of knowledge. And even today, some people think that is the center of feeling. Because when you are in pain, when you are in anguish, you say, I feel it in my heart. I mean, the heart is not feeling anything. What it's going on is that your brain releases certain enzymes that causes your vascular, your tubes, your arteries to get smaller. As a result, your heart is making more strength to pump that same blood. So you feel that, this pain comes from your heart. It's because you miss someone, but it has nothing to do with the heart. The heart is not thinking, your brain is thinking, but because there is this narrowing of our vessels, the heart is making more force to pump the same amount of blood, so you get this heart feeling. But the brain, as Emil Krepler said, is the source of all mental functioning. Therefore, we should study the brain. William James, the great American psychiatrist, also spent a lot of time studying depression. And then we have Sigmund Freud, who also gave lots of study on depression. They changed the word from melancholy to depression because of the symptoms that people described why they were feeling depressed. If you look at the dictionary, the word depression, it actually means a geological default on the planet. Like the Death Valley in California, that is below sea level. We call that a depression. This is why the conditions there are so harsh. So because we feel this sort of low when we are depressed, they call it depression. Now, I'm sure each one here has sort of felt depressed before in their lives. We all have our blue moods, and then we don't feel as good as we should or as we want to feel. But it doesn't mean that we are depressed. What are the symptoms of depression? Are we depressed? Do you lack sleep? I mean, at some point we all did. Are you not eating well? Or are you eating too much? I guess we all suffer from that one. It's unbelievable nowadays how I see the scooter industry, the motorized wheelchair, how it's gone up so high. It's not because more people are getting paralyzed. It's because people are getting so big. They have to ride those motorcycle chairs just because they cannot walk around. And they're the ones who should be walking, right? But they're not. So are we eating a lot? Have we lost pleasures in things that we felt great doing before? It's called annihilation. The loss of interest, the lost interest in sex, the lost in things that usually we had fun before. Hopelessness. You are so uncertain of tomorrow. And that is one of the most detrimental to our health, the lack of hope. Because when you don't have hope, it means that you are uncertain about tomorrow. You don't know what Monday holds for you. Since you're not sure, whatever is going on today, Sunday, it is unbearable. The pain is just too much to handle. It just intensifies your depression. Do we feel hopeless? These are some of the symptoms of depression. Now, when we feel the symptoms, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are depressed individuals. because these symptoms needs to be constant for approximately 2 weeks. If it's shorter, it's probably just a rough time you're going through. If they are persistent, it might be depression. Now, what are the causes of depression? Why do we feel these things? Psychiatrists divide the causes of depression in 2 different groups: endogenous causes and exogenous causes. Now, why is it important to study the cause of depression? Well, that's because the solution, it's actually seeing what the cause is to eradicate the source of the problem. Unfortunately, the drug industry has had so much control over things that people could care less now what is the cause of our problems. Now, when you sit with a psychiatrist, usually he asks you questions that starts with the word how. How is your eating? How is your appetite? How's your sleep? How's your mood? And then you say, well, I'm not eating well, I'm eating too much, I'm not sleeping enough, or I'm sleeping 18 hours a day. I feel terrible all the time, I feel great. If I was feeling good, I wouldn't be going there. I'm feeling bad, so he prescribes you a medication. Now, the medication will not work on the cause of the problem. He heard the symptoms of what is bothering you. The medication is towards controlling the symptoms, not solving the problem. Let's say you have a flu. Now, the flu per se, it's a virus that is constantly changing within our body. This is why every fall you get a different injection for the new structure of the virus that is prevalent. Now, when you buy a Benadryl, the Benadryl is working on the symptoms. What are the symptoms of a flu? You got fever, you got the chills, runny nose. So when you buy the Benadryl, you are attacking the symptoms, not the cause of the problem. Your immune system in your body is fighting that virus. So when the doctor prescribes you Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil, these medications are towards working on the symptoms, not the cause of the problem. Now, if I maintain the symptoms, I am not really solving anything. I could have the flu for a whole year and still I just don't have runny nose or watery eyes or the chills. Now, that won't bother me too much, but if I have depression and I'm on forever medication, that doesn't mean I feel great. It simply means that it's controlling my symptoms. I'm sort of a zombie instead of living life. I'm just vegetating through life. So it's important that we know what the cause of the problem is. Unfortunately, the drug companies are not really interested in you solving the cause of your problem. And I speak from personal experience because I work for a hospital. Now, I cannot tell you the hospital now. Someone might call out, I will get fired. I work with the psychiatrist, and you see these commercials on TV. These drug companies, they will make sure that you have a symptom there, They want you to be on their drug forever. You pay attention to these commercials. It's so funny, They will make sure that they'll find something that you have. This is how the commercial goes, It's 10:30 at nighttime. Do you feel your eyelashes very, very heavy over your eyes, I think you have this condition, Restless leg syndrome, what is that, Have you heard of restless leg syndrome? When you sleep, do you make a funny noise with your mouth? I think you have this. Here's a prescription for that, Does water comes out of your mouth when you're sleeping? You have this condition. They will make sure that you do have some sort of illness to be dependent forever on their medication. And we are individuals who are addicted to easy fix. Isn't it wonderful to think that we just take a pill and problems will be solved? But it doesn't work like that. No. And they oversell the benefits of these medications so we could be hooked on them. And yet, we're not solving anything. We're just covering it up. And these issues that causes our depression, they're so strong that is the same as a spring. Let's say that this flower is actually a spring, and I'm trying to suppress the symptoms. I'm trying to suppress the spring by exerting force on top of the spring. The more I try to exert force downward, the spring exerting more force upward. So the more I try to cover up the symptoms with medication, the stronger they're going to get. This is why you go back and you tell him that the medication is not working anymore. We must increase the dosage. It's what they call a tolerance to the medication. Now, this is if we're taking medication. What if we're taking alcohol to cover up the symptoms? You know that a bottle of beer will suffice for this weekend. Next week, to create the same effect, you must have a bottle and a half. The following week, you must take 2 bottles, and so forth. If this is marijuana, pardon my words, but a joint will suffice this weekend. Next week, it has to be a joint and a half. If this is cocaine, maybe a bag would do it for this weekend, but for next week, a bag and a half. If this is food, maybe a $9.99 buffet, a plate might do it, but next week, a plate and a half has to do it. Why? Because the hole inside me, the existential vacuum that I'm creating by not solving the problem, is just getting bigger, bigger, and bigger. That explains the progressive nature of any addiction. Because we're not solving the problem. We're just trying to cover up the hole that is inside us. So psychiatrists, they break the causes of depression into 2 big groups. And they call it the endogenous group and the exogenous groups. Now, what they refer by the words endogenous and exogenous, it's just interior and exterior causes of depression. The endogenous causes of depression will actually be heredity. So let's say your mother had depression. Your chances of you develop depression is 15 to 30%. If your father and your mother had depression, possibility of you developing depression is 50 to 75%. Your genes, they control your entire body development. That means your brain chemistry will be dictated by your genes, and since you inherited these bad genes from your parents, there is a great possibility that you'll also develop depression. Why? Well, that's because we are inside this machine called the body. The body is an organism made up of organs, a heart, your liver, your lungs, and these organs are made up of tissues. Tissues are made up of cells, and cells, they are the fundamental element of our physical reality. So your brain is made up of cells that we call neurons. And the reason we're able to see, speak, walk, communicate with one another, it's because neurons are actually talking with one another. And they talk with one another by releasing chemicals that we call neurotransmitters. So at the end of a neuron, the cell of a neuron, it has a body the head, the axon, and the dendrites. So these neurotransmitters are released from the dendrites and they go into the head of another neuron. But when someone is depressed, either these chemicals are too low or too high. If they are too low, this is where you have the psychiatrist prescribing something to get them high. If they're too high, psychiatrist will prescribe something to get them too low. Now, how can we measure these things? Very, very hard. This is why seeing a psychiatrist to go for a medication is almost like try and error. You know, he puts you on this stuff, and he would ask you a month later, how are you feeling about this? You say, I think it's working. Well, let's keep you this way. I don't think it's working. Let's change it, because he doesn't know the chemistry of your brain. And since we are so physically unique, what works for one person doesn't work for the next. You know, when women perfume, the same perfume gives off different fragrance in different bodies, because the chemistry of each of our bodies are so unique. And medication works the same. And if someone inherited depression from their parents, they might grow up never to be depressed. And once again, science comes to explain this. You know, how come this person had both parents who are depressed and yet he never developed depression? And we have this guy here whose parents were never depressed and yet he's fully depressed. How can we explain this? Now here comes the exogenous causes of depression, the exterior causes. Something traumatic had to happen with this person alive in order for him to feel depressed this way. In some traumatic event, even he lost a father, he lost his mother, he lost his girlfriend, the house was burned down. This traumatic event made him feel this way. So not only is sufficient for you to have this endogenous causes, but the exogenous cause must be present as well for depression to be fully developed. And once this person has this depression, their entire lives are very complicated. And there are estimates that there are approximately $50 billion spent on treating depression alone. And so obviously that is not economically wise for any country to be spending that amount of money on depression. It's not just treating the symptoms, it's because when you are depressed, you say you are incapable, and as a result, you're not working. If you're not working, you're not producing, you're not paying taxes, and the whole 9 yards. So therefore, depression is a serious case in all of our planet. And the numbers are not getting any lower, they're just getting higher and higher and higher. Now, from the Spiritist point of view, what would be the solution, the causes, and the consequences of depression? Because for the material world, for the atheist scientists, we already know what the causes are, endogenous and exogenous. We already know what the symptoms are, and we already know what the solution is, medication, and for some of them, talk therapy and cognitive therapy. Someone might feel bad about themselves because they spent their entire childhood listening to negative information. You know, maybe they had a rough stepfather or a mean mother, and these people educated this child believing that this child was not going to amount to nothing. You know, when your little psyche is being developed as a child, if you constantly have information of people telling you you're not worth anything, you know, you're not going to amount to nothing, you sort of believe in that stuff and you feel terrible about yourself. So you have a distorted perception of reality. If someone doesn't respond good morning to you, you immediately assume that person has something against you. And maybe the person never heard you, but you have a distorted reality. You see mean people everywhere, and the world is against you. For that, we give cognitive therapy. and medication to treat the symptoms. But from the Spiritist perspective, what is the cause of depression? There are a couple of possibilities why someone is feeling depressed. Number one, they are not doing with their lives what they're supposed to do. Now, if you're not doing with your life what you meant to do, it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to feel good about it. It is impossible. Now, in Spiritism, we never ask you to believe in what we say. We always ask, ponder, think, use your rationality to digest the information. Why is it that someone feels unhappy when they're not doing with their life what they're supposed to do? This is the explanation. Let's say I have a pen with me. Now, can I get your pen? Let's have the actual pen here instead of imagining. Now, this pen here did not pop up into existence. This pen is an effect. What is the cause of this pen? The creator, the designer of this pen. So we call this a creation, and the man who created this pen, the creator. Now, there is no such a thing that is created for the sake of creation. All creations are created with a purpose. Now, the man who designed this pen, he created for what purpose? To write. That's the purpose of this pen, to write. Now, let me try to use this pen for a purpose which was not created for. I'm going to try to use it as a screwdriver and try to remove this screw here. I could spend the entire life trying to remove this screw with this pen. It's not going to work. If I try to use this pen as a hammer and break this table, I could spend a whole year here and the pen won't break and the table won't break. Why? Because this pen was designed to write, not to unscrew or break things. Therefore, the only reason we feel miserable, the only reason there is emptiness, sadness, unhappiness in our lives is because we keep using it for reasons which were not intended for. You did not pop up into existence. You came from a source, and that source is God. And that creator created you with a purpose, to grow intellectually and morally. If you're not doing those things, it is impossible for you to feel good in your life. Impossible. Because that's what you intended for. That's what you're created for. We're created for growth. It's the law of progress. If we're not growing, it is impossible for us to feel happy. Because happiness is not with what we have. Happiness is the effort that we do to fulfill our purpose. That's what happiness is the result of our effort to grow. It's not even the outcome itself. It's actually the effort we make to grow. That's where peace and happiness comes from. So if we're not feeling our purpose, impossible for us to feel happy. As a result, depression will kick in. Now, can you actually believe that a pill will change my mentality? Obviously not. A pill will not make me do what I have to do in life. This is why medication per se cannot be a solution. And I'm stressing so much the fact of medication because we're addicted to easy fixes. And there is no easy fix to that major problem in our lives. The mentality needs to be changed. Second reason why someone might feel depressed, because of guilt. Guilt is a terrible thing in our mental world. When we do something that causes someone pain, that will bother us so much that we realize that we had fooled the entire planet but it's impossible to fool our own consciousness. What we call consciousness, it's actually God with the small g inside us. Consciousness. In the Spirit's book, Allan Kardec, he actually asked the spirits this so profound question. Where is the law of God written? Where is the law of God written? That is the question. So some of us might assume that it's in the Bible, maybe in the Quran, maybe on the Bhagavad Gita, maybe on the Spirit's book, And the spirits answered, in your consciousness. No one has to tell us that we're doing something wrong. We know it. When we're about to do something wrong, we know it. We listen to that inner voice. Now, boy, we have so many defense mechanisms to bypass that inner voice. It's what we call excuses. And we become experts in lying to ourselves. So good at it that we believe in our own lies. Some of the defense mechanism to bypass the voice of consciousness, we usually say, you know what, I see that she's doing it, I see that he's doing it, so everybody's doing it, it's okay to do it. And then we do something wrong just because a group of people is doing it. It doesn't matter if you have 100,000 people doing what is wrong. What is wrong is still wrong. It doesn't matter the amount of people that is doing it. Can you actually believe that in World War II, when Hitler was killing 6 million Jews in Germany, if you didn't believe in Hitler, you were actually considered insane? They put you in mental hospitals, in mental institutions. Of course, they will kill you because you were not thinking as the majority was. Was it wrong? Yes, it was definitely wrong. And rhetorics are people who study the art of public speaking. And they say that one of the best speakers of all times was Adolf Hitler, because he put so much passion into what he said. He believed the message, therefore he made other people believe it. It was great intelligence used for evil purposes. When we have intelligence without morality, that's what produces evilness. That statement alone might explain to us all the barbaric things that we're seeing in today's world. So much intelligence, so much intellectual power, yet the lack of morality. People using great technology to do evil things. And those who are religiously blind, who doesn't want to see it, they blame the technology. It's not the technology that's evil. Technology is neutral. It's how we use it. But